When prosecutors resign en masse, it's never because there's nothing to investigate, but because they are being demanded to investigate the wrong people. This week, senior officials in the Department of Justice did something unprecedented. They quit, not because of pay or pettiness, but because the Department of Justice refused to investigate the killing of Renee Good and instead pressured prosecutors to look into her widow, Becca Good, instead. This is why everything happening in Minneapolis should scare the hell out of anybody who thinks civil rights still mean something. So let's look at the overview of the case. At least six senior officials inside the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division resigned after leadership refused to open a civil rights investigation into the ICE shooting of Renee Nicole Good. The Department of Civil Rights Violations in the Department of Justice is not able to see if there was a civil rights violation that took place. Can we just understand that? Even if you're somebody who thinks that Renee Good was this domestic terrorist and you believe the DHS narrative, wouldn't you want there to still be an investigation take place? This is the type of stuff that happens with zero accountability in countries with no democracy. We need to have transparency in our government. Even if you believe that the government is acting altruistically, there should be as much transparency as possible. Let's hear it in the back for those limited government people, right? At the same time, the Department of Justice instead pushed Minnesota prosecutors to investigate Good's widow, Becca Good. So not only are we not looking into the killing to see whether or not a federal agent acted within their authority, but now we are shifting the blame to Renee Good and her wife. Let's see what we can get on her wife, because that apparently is going to lead more context to why Renee Good was shot 4 times in the face by an ICE agent. That's what we're going to talk about. This pressure triggered a second wave of resignations. Veteran prosecutor Joseph Thomas, who is a Republican appointed by Donald Trump in June of 2025, resigned, as well as three additional Minnesota attorneys. All of them quit instead of pursue what they believe to be a politically motivated investigation with no legal basis. Department of Justice leadership claims that the resignations were pre planned and unrelated, but multiple sources familiar with the departures say this claim is absolutely false. This is now the largest Department of Justice walkout since a similar internal protest earlier this year. Funny how that's happening under the second Trump administration. All of these Department of Justice heads feeling like they have to resign because they are not doing what they signed up to do. Nobody can claim this is politics as usual. This is unprecedented. And according to a January 14th letter obtained by the Minnesota Star Tribune, 33 former federal prosecutors, Democrats and Republicans, are now urging the Trump administration to reverse its decision to exclude the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension from the investigation. So the federal government not only is hiding the evidence that they've compiled from the public, they're also not even allowing state and local law enforcement within Minnesota to be able to collaborate on the case. This is the most blatant corruption that we've seen in the Department of Justice. And I don't know how long. It's absolutely insane. The letter came one day after six prosecutors resigned in protest. And former Assistant U.S. Attorney Doug Kelly, with 51 years in law enforcement, said this: "Yesterday was the darkest day for the federal law enforcement in my 51 years of practicing law." These people are not activists. They are not leftist protesters. They are career prosecutors who have led racketeering trials, prosecuted fraud cases that were Republican leaning, and stayed through multiple administrations because Minnesota's U.S. Attorney's Office was historically non political. At least 10 signatories to the letter were hired by Republican appointees. One former U.S. attorney put it bluntly: "If this is not a civil rights case, I don't know what it is." So let's remind everybody exactly what happened. Renee Nicole Good, 37-year-old mother of three, was shot in the face by ICE agent Jonathan Ross during a federal operation in Minneapolis. Within hours, the federal officials labeled her a domestic terrorist, a violent rioter, somebody who had the intention of killing an ICE agent. But all of the video evidence shows that her car was boxed in, her wheels were turned away from the ICE agent. 5 ICE agents surrounded her vehicle, showing that the car was not imminent threat. The car did not show intention of killing ICE agents, because if I'm an ICE agent, I'm not going to surround a car that shows clear signs that it's trying to kill me. I'm actually going to protect myself. Maybe I'll go behind my own vehicle. Maybe I will just exit the scene. I will not go towards the car that is trying to kill me. This is false. This makes no sense logistically. Officers then opened fire through the windshield. The Department of Justice then blocked Minnesota authorities from participating in normal police shooting review, handed the case exclusively to the FBI. So the federal government is then investigating the federal government on proper misconduct, and then declared there was no basis for criminal civil rights investigation. Former prosecutors say that determination cannot be made without a full investigation. And that is the problem. This country, we have a mantra of innocent until proven guilty. And if you are going to label someone a domestic terrorist before there's an investigation that takes place, it shows where your bias is. You don't actually care about the truth. You don't care about making sure that the American public is made aware of what the situation is. You want to say what you think because you want to defend ICE agents without any justification. This is why on the ground reporting from Minneapolis itself matters a lot. Panic World, which is a Courier podcast, went to the city to actually document the general feeling of protesters, what's happening in real time. And they found that right wing provocateurs are continuing to escalate a lot of these protests. ICE agents are filming content for themselves, and armed federal officers are operating with near total impunity. So check it out. The link is in the description. Highly recommend watching the entire segment. It's about 50 minutes of us being able to interview people that are actually demonstrating in the street and showing what the feelings look like of people who are going through this ICE abuse. This is so much bigger than just one case. We are literally witnessing the collapse of civil rights enforcement in this country. And three huge things should alarm you. The first is that federal agents now have less oversight than local police departments. Whenever there's an incident that happens in local jurisdiction, those local law enforcement has to collaborate with state officials in order to compile the most truth possible to release to the public. And even then, we know that law enforcement still hides things from the public, even with that collaboration between state and local law enforcement. So if they're not even allowed to see the evidence that's compiled by federal authorities, how much cover up is actually taking place? We also know that ICE agents can kill people and be shielded by federal authority because now they can completely operate with impunity, and all they have to account for is the Department of Justice Christy Noem, who we've seen last week would just say that somebody's a domestic terrorist without any investigation taking place. Civil rights law is literally being hollowed out from the inside. Career prosecutors are being forced out of doing their jobs, and political loyalty is replacing evidence. The shooter is protected, the widow is targeted and investigated, and investigators who object are removed from the department completely. This is not law enforcement. I have to reiterate and emphasize how damning this evidence is for corruption. Joseph Thompson is the second in charge in the U.S. Attorney's Office, appointed by Donald Trump. And reports show that he objected to the Department of Justice refusal to investigate the shooting as a civil rights matter, and to have been outraged by what sources describe as an alleged demand to pursue a criminal investigation into Becca. He initially sought to investigate in conjunction with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, a state agency that reviews police shootings, though state officials said the Department of Justice effectively excluded them. It's insane. It is insane when a Republican attorney, a lead prosecutor, a senior official is trying to collaborate with state police and then is blocked from that decision at the behest of the president. This there's nothing else to say other than this is the most corruption that we've seen in the Department of Justice in Trump's second term so far. If six senior Department of Justice officials quit instead of following orders, and 33 former federal prosecutors demand a joint investigation, the problem is not the evidence that's available. The problem is the power that is shielding it. And if the federal government is able to say that video evidence doesn't matter, grief looks suspicious, and civil rights lawyers are expendable, we witness the collapse of civil rights enforcement in the entire country. And that is not justice. That is a system telling you exactly who it exists to protect. The question is not whether or not Renee Good deserves a federal investigation, which she does, and Republican prosecutors agree that she does. It is this: if the people that is supposed to protect our civil rights are being pushed out for trying, who is left to stop them the next time that it happens?